this week we're going to be talking about Miami Vice Part 1 and how it influenced, impacted, and entranced so many back then hardcore during that era for many, many years, all the way up to present day. Now here's your host, Kennedy Rizzo and Cooper Lee.
Kennedy. Our discussion that'll take place in the Retro Orchard this week routinely is one I'm completely thrilled about and has been a long time coming. Since we love so much just about anything retro 80s, we definitely put this fascinating retro show on our to-do list, and that is talking about none other than Miami Vice.
Miami Vice!
Are we happy about that?
Just a little bit. Widely described as being resplendent with authentic 80s fashion, music, and overall vibe, this riveting nighttime crime drama follows two undercover detectives and their extended team through the edgy adventures, the mean streets, and dark underbelly of Miami, Florida.
So, Miami Vice debuted in 1984 on the NBC network and ran to 1989 for 5 whole seasons.
Mm-hmm.
It was created by Anthony Yerkovich, and it was executive produced and directed by Michael Mann. But more on Michael Mann's vision here in a bit.
That's right. Now, the details run down on our two main stars, our two undercover cops.
Spill the deets.
Okay. All of the iconic 80s shows, there's no doubt that Miami Vice had one of the hottest male duos on the small screen, hands down.
Sure.
You got James Sonny Crockett, played by Don Johnson, and Ricardo Rico Tubbs, played by Philip Michael Thomas. As already stated, they worked undercover for the Metro DA Police Department, and when you think back to many of the seedy scenarios they'd find themselves in, it was that element that easily identified the very real feel of what true Miami was at the time. Pure 80s gold.
This is so true. With Miami Vice debuting in the year of 84, that's fresh off of so much that went down in Miami in the late 70s, early 80s, with Cuban, Haitian immigration, the dark underworld of the drug culture with its cartels and such.
Oh, yeah.
It is reported as portrayed a year earlier in 1983 in the feature film Scarface. Old school Miami was more of a laid-back, elderly population retirement mecca, albeit the dark, seedy side that was exploding on the down low, which was evidently overtaking the city.
And what key elements that made Miami Vice spark well with audiences everywhere was that it drew heavily on the oh-so-80s new wave culture and flawlessly integrated the contemporary pop and rock offerings right along with impressive stylized visuals. So how true was this fact? How much did this resonate? Well, check out what the ever-popular People magazine said of Miami Vice at the time.
People magazine. Oh, that is so 80s.
It sure is. So they said, and I quote, that Miami Vice was the first show to really look new and different since color TV was invented. End quote and facts.
So we mentioned earlier that Anthony Yerkovich created the concept of Miami Vice as he was fresh off the success as a writer-producer for the hugely popular nighttime serial police procedural TV series, Hill Street Blues. So he found so much content through doing extensive research for the show, Miami Vice, that's where his initial idea came from in creating the show about a pair of vice cops in Miami.
Okay.
So Mr. Yerkovich ended up writing a script for a 2-hour-long show pilot set for his new retro-style police show. But did you know that the title Miami Vice almost was not a thing?
Do tell.
Fun fact. Miami Vice was almost titled Gold Coast.
Okay.
I like Miami Vice so much better.
Oh, me as well, Cooper. Good grief. And I do believe that the way they got the title Miami Vice was, when they'd be in the middle of apprehending somebody and they, running the scene together. They'd be there and they have their pieces out and they pointed at the people and they'd be like, Miami Vice! Both Crockett and Tubbs had lungs on them. They had pipes on them. I mean, you heard them a mile away. So, yeah, could you imagine how lack of effect would be like, Gold Coast! Yeah, I don't know. So the change was refreshing.
You'd at least be wondering, where is this taking place? At least we know where it took place, right?
Oh, my goodness. Gold Coast! Okay. Oh, my gosh. But... I think that so many of the hardcore retro fans of Miami Vice do too, though.
Yes.
So Miami Vice it is. So in keeping authentic to the show's new title, most of the episodes of this neo-noir focused on combating drug trafficking and prostitution, aka the seedy aspect in Miami Vice. Hence the need for an undercover approach. So often the build-up and excitement of what goes down on screen so often ended up in some form of a grand climax or grand finale where there may be an intense gun battle claiming the lives of several criminals before they can be apprehended. So as noted, and you can definitely see and feel this as you watch and get engrossed in the show, you pick up on that undercurrent of cynicism and futility which underlies the entire undertaking.
Yeah. So creator Anthony Yerkovich, while collecting research on Miami, likened so many of his finds as sort of a modern-day American Casablanca. The Humphrey Bogart movie, Bogey.
Oh, interesting. Go on.
Yeah, he observed the threads of an interesting socioeconomic tide pool we touched on a moment ago. The massive amounts of refugees from Cuba, Haiti, and Central America. And then on top of all that, you have the drug trade and all of the fascinating amounts of service industries that really revolve around that whole industry.
Yeah, which actually puts one in mind about the money laundering, bail bondsmen, shifty lawyers who gladly service drug smugglers. This was all portrayed and conveyed very, very well as Miami Vice played out each week. And that was actually the basic draw and appeal to the show. I just love Miami Vice and pretty much everything about it. We own seasons 1 through 4 on DVD. I know we totally date ourselves every time we say that.
It could have been VHS.
Oh yeah, then we probably should have been buried. But anyway, my hubs and I will get into one of our hardcore retro 80s moods, and we'll pop one of those buddies in. Talk about a good time, bar none.
But for the layperson, or shall I say fan, Miami Vice was the quintessential example of pure 80s fodder.
Yes.
And what made it so 80s was definitely both the pointed fashion and the music. Insane hand-in-glove concept.
Yes, Coop. The selection of music and cinematography borrowed heavily from the ever-emerging new wave culture of the 80s was very apparent. The show was written for an MTV audience, which utilizes vivid images, conveys emotions and energy, versus relying solely on plot, words, and characters. So Miami Vice worked for so many because it literally was like one big, long, riveting music video to tune into each and every week. I know. I mean, that is like so etched into our memories. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I hear songs now, and you think of like everything's kind of a video. I don't know. It's weird. It was pure gold. The combination of factors which made Miami Vice an instant hit. Big surprise? Not.
And so much so, not big surprise, is that it drives this fun fact even more so. Get this. Fun fact. Miami Vice in its first season really saw, heard, and felt that amazing, accepting acclaim from the fans.
Mm-hmm.
In its first season, Miami Vice garnered an unprecedented 15, count them, 15 Emmy Award nominations.
That is very impressive. Oh my gosh, the fans have spoken.
Indeed they did.
In regards to some of the music used throughout, it is interesting in segments of the show. It sometimes used music-based stanzas that became synonymous and distinctive to Miami Vice. The producers gambled and experimented with this sub-style and ran with it. So, how do we describe success?
And while filming Miami Vice on location, on set, and in regards to vehicles, fashion, etc., the precedents were set as for there to be no earth tones used, as per mandated by executive producer and director Michael Mann.
Oh yeah, Michael Mann's vision and shooting style is sheer genius.
Yes.
Absolutely love his distinctive thumbprint on his media and film projects.
Totally agree. This was a genius move on his part.
Mm-hmm.
But with all this action going down, taking place in Miami, they wanted that real, authentic Art Deco look and feel. They were keen on promoting and reviving that 80s style. Fun fact. Miami Vice was one of the first network TV programs that was broadcast in stereophonic sound. It is mixed in stereo sound for its entire run. Yeah, so highly appropriate for things to be done in this fashion, seeing how it is the MTV era after all.
I agree. Now, let's get into some of the key characters and touch on their storylines on the show some, shall we?
Okay, yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we spoke of our main characters, that of Sonny Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs, played by Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas, respectively. Now, it's really these two actors and their raw talent, in portraying these two fascinating undercover cops that exploded and defined the show. Right, Coop?
Mm-hmm.
The buddy cop chemistry was great, and these type of shows and buddy cop movies were a huge thing in the 80s. Like, you put you in mind of 48 Hours, or is it another 48 Hours, and Lethal Weapon, and so on. There's so many of those types. Miami Vice showcased this connection flawlessly. Both Crockett and Tubbs have a good rapport. We really bought their both being friends. They worked well together and having each other's backs. They are Crockett and Tubbs, hands down. But it almost wasn't so, was it, Cooper?
Nope. I found this fun fact to be very interesting. Fun fact. Did you know that Don Johnson was not the first choice considered for the role of Sonny Crockett? No, not at all. There were actually 4 previous choices up for the role. Have you heard of Jeff Bridges? Nick Nolte? Mickey Rourke? How about Larry Wilcox? How familiar, right? Well, concerning that last entry, that of Larry Wilcox, you'd be right to recall that he was heavily affiliated with yet another curiously exciting retro 70s, 80s police series, that of Chips.
Yay!
Yeah. Kennedy and myself fondly recall Chips too and all of those adventures. But if you'd like to actually do a deep dive on the retro TV series Chips, check out our episode dedicated to do just that. Join the discussion on what the California Highway Patrol is all about here on the Caramel Apples podcast.
That's so cool, Cooper. But back briefly to the producers of Miami Vice toying with Larry Wilcox being a potential candidate for playing Sonny Crockett. Although he was briefly considered for the role, they eventually decided against it because although he did an amazing job as Officer Jonathan Baker, well, that's who he was to the fans.
Yeah.
So as not to be typecast, producers passed on casting Larry Wilcox as Sonny Crockett due to feeling that it wouldn't be any good going from playing one cop role right into another. Sound. It just wouldn't be a good fit.
Yeah.
Over time and combing through other potential candidates, Don Johnson was chosen as Crockett. Then he was brilliantly paired with Philip Michael Thomas. So Don Johnson was the ripe old age of 34 years old. Creative execs took a gamble on casting him due to Johnson starring in several earlier unsuccessful pilots for other shows. Now, he was a bit of a risk in the beginning, but he proved himself to be Sonny Crockett.
It does seem like a role made just for him.
Yes, it does.
None other, and the rest, as they say, goes down in history.
Yes.
Now we know that both Crockett and Tubbs were undercover vice cops making their rounds and presence known throughout the dark side of Miami and the rest of the opulent South Florida underworld.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, being undercover, they had to have proper pseudonyms in order to navigate and infiltrate questionable spaces.
Ooh.
Yes. So you, Orchard Archivers, can you remember what both Crockett and Tubbs' pseudonyms were that they used in order to covertly navigate Miami's underworld? Hit us back, you archivers, and dive into our intriguing discussion this week.
I can't wait to hear what comes up.
I know. Should be some interesting guesses, and hopefully someone hits it right on the money.
That's right. They will. We have faith.
Yes. So on that note, I have a fun fact to share. So fun fact, did you know that with the show being a phenomenon and is legendary down to this day, it was obviously an inspiration for the video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City, in which the pseudonyms chosen for our lead detectives in the game was Cracker and Butts. That is with 2 T's.
Ooh, that made it worse. Cracker and Butts with 2 T's. You're going, what are you laughing for? That's our names.
That's our names.
That's how we roll.
This is serious.
Okay, point taken, Cracker and Butts. The other notable cast members of Miami Vice were fellow cop comrades, eye candy for the show, Gina Calabrese and Trudy Joplin, played by Sandra Santiago and Olivia Brown, respectively. Then we have fellow comrades and comic relief Stan Switek and Larry Zito. Original detective Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez was captain in the first few episodes, but was eventually killed off the show. Detective Lou Rodriguez was played by the late Gregory Sierra, but then replaced by Lieutenant Marty Castillo, played by the intensely talented Edward James Olmos. Marty is captain on Miami Vice. That's who we knew and whom we connected with. More on him and the other cast members a little later.
You know, I've always wondered about that. You know, like when you have a character that starts off in the pilot and then like within a couple shows, they seemingly find their demise.
Yeah.
And I wonder, it's like, is it just they're not working out in the role? Are they not happy in the role? Or was that actually part of the story from the beginning?
Well,
What do you think?
It's interesting you mentioned that because Lieutenant Rodriguez, a.k.a. Gregory Sierra, he was only in there for 5 or so episodes. He was killed off, like you said. So what it was, a lot of times it's contractual disputes or issues, but I researched this and it said that he just didn't want to be in Miami, Florida. He didn't want to be down there. So they did his bidding and they got rid of him on the show and he could do other things. So
Okay, so at least you cleared it up on this show series, why he did not continue on with the franchise, but
yeah, he just wasn't feeling it, I guess.
So when talking about connecting, with these characters, it's good to look back on what Crockett and Tubbs actually did on their part of the police force. Mm-hmm. They largely worked in close connection with and alongside the DEA, or Drug Enforcement Administration, an agency of the U.S. Department of Justice, in order to assist take down so many of the inroads put in by those heavily involved in the drug trade.
Mm-hmm.
But so often these key drug kingpins and their henchmen and couriers would seemingly be able to continue their run of their game and move their product in and out of the country right under the DEA's nose.
Yep.
So this scenario was quite key and played out so many times on episodes any given week on Miami Vice. And how do we know or suspect this?
Well, all one has to do is look all around us, and you can sense and see that this activity is practically everywhere, really, and not just in the depths of Miami, Florida.
Yeah, but Miami is definitely a most convenient hub of sorts, though. So there's that.
There is that. And this activity was booming right under the DEA and Vice's noses, as you just mentioned. So how is it that this is not caught with all of these government agencies in place? And it's fairly curious how so many government agencies, whether on the metro, state, or federal level, look the other way and allow these seedy types to roam about the mean streets and conduct their lucrative drug businesses. Sadly, the drug industry is big business. Can we say corruption personified? Well, you get the picture. This scenario process is a deep, dark rabbit hole. Catch just about any episode of Miami Vice, and you'll no doubt see this play out.
Yeah. And Kennard, where does all of the seized money product go? As we've already hinted at, but, crime is big business.
Oh, yeah.
Drugs are big business.
Oh, yeah.
So call it cynicism, but due to these dark, corrupt daily undertakings, now we've got a front row seat perspective of all of this by way of Miami Vice.
Thank you!
With all their pretty colors, too.
Yeah, we just wanted a good show. That's what we meant by that. I mean, seriously.
In many of the episodes, so often end in an intense shootout, claiming the lives of several criminals right before they can be apprehended. And that undercurrent of cynicism we just referred to and futility underlies the entire series, so much so that detectives repeatedly refer to the very nature of drug interdiction called whack-a-mole. All of a sudden, I am back in showbiz pizza.
That is 80s. You're nuts.
So this term appropriately points to the horde of drug cartels quickly replacing the ones that were just apprehended. Wash, rinse, repeat. Fun fact, in order to help get potential cast members more into character, the creative execs took them on actual stakeouts by the real Miami Vice unit. That's kind of scary. Okay, so...
It is.
Sure, they had to sign a waiver of sorts.
What's this for? Get that away from me. I need a pencil.
These are all prop guns, right? So how cool and exciting I bet that was.
Very cool. That's right, Cooper. Crockett and Tubbs together took us on a wild journey as they took us on the opulent Miami drug world. Miami Vice was superb and infectious to boot. There's no denying the fact that something special happened in the 80s. Where else can you get a couple of nice-looking, Italio-casual, trendy undercover Vice cops to take us on such an exciting jaunt in the Miami, Florida landscape underbelly? Exhibit A, we have Sonny Crockett, the detective, who regularly sports a 5 o'clock shadow, no socks, along with his array of pastel suits, who also happens to live on a sailboat guarded by his pet alligator. Yup, we're officially in Florida. Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show. When Michael Mann's masterpiece hit NBC's Friday night schedule some 38 years ago, the formula was rewritten. In the very first episode, we meet a cop who is estranged from his wife and small son, whose partner gets killed in a freak car bombing, and who is a step ahead of being pulled off the streets. Poor Crockett. Talk about issues.
Major issues. Fun fact. Did you know how Don Johnson actually landed the role of Sonny Crockett? Well, while auditioning for the role, he came into a script reading for the producers of the show directly from one of their routine all-night stakeouts.
Oh.
It is said that he was tired, his hair was a mess, and ding, 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 he hadn't shaved yet that morning. So that disheveled, rolled right out of bed look showed the creative execs what a real-life vice cop would probably look like following a long night of work. And lo and behold, Don Johnson was hired instantly.
Awesome.
Yes. So we got our Sonny Crockett. So cool. A fun fact, too. Don Johnson, I have to tell you why I laughed. Don Johnson was nominated for a Golden Globe for his brilliant portrayal of this intriguing persona. I have Dan Johnson.
So you do.
So in Miami Vice, there were major breakthroughs by some well-known icons that were key to pop culture, as well as ushering in many new styles of music that made their way into mainstream media.
Yes, the choice of music and cinematography showcased in Miami Vice was deeply borrowed from the emerging new wave culture of the 80s, and stands guilty as charged in taking over the musical landscape. MTV debuted in August 1981, and we have to admit, has never been quite the same since. One of the show's directors, Anthony Yerkovich, remarked, and I quote, so actually we had made this quote before, but now we know which creative exec said this. So
Okay, cool, yeah.
He says that I quote, "The show is written for an MTV audience, which is more interested in images, emotions, and energy than plot and character and words," end quote. So that was executive producer Anthony Yerkovich.
Got it.
So we could really feel, sense, and experience that statement each and every time we tune in to watch Miami Vice.
And we most certainly could.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these key components implemented made Miami Vice into an instant hit and fan favorite, as was already briefly referenced about this captivating series, garnering, as mentioned earlier, 15 Emmy nominations. Now, that's no mere accident.
It isn't.
You know, Miami Vice revolutionized TV by throwing storylines at the audience with so many twists and turns, with such a complexity that it taxed everyone's intellect. You know, they actually dared to challenge the audience with twists and plot turns they might not understand, and it worked.
Miami Vice started out in the beginning containing the standard elements of layman's police procedural, but soon that concept was shelved in favor of implementing a more slick, distinctive style. An Art Deco revival wanting bright pastel, vibrant island-esque colors while shooting on set. So that's that no earth tones you were talking about.
Yeah.
So the series' strong commitment to the rich visual quality and flavor of each episode made Miami Vice one of the most expensive shows to produce during that time. In fact, check this out, Cooper. The cost to produce just one episode of the show was greater than that of the entire annual budget of the Miami Police Department's Vice Unit.
What?
Yeah, and we just briefly mentioned it, but like it was over like $1 million some dollars.
That's crazy.
One episode.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I don't know. That's some money bouncing around.
Yes, that is insane, but so cool that they wanted to put that much into it, you know, because they wanted it to be successful. So,
and it was, yeah.
Can't buy it. It's not cheap. So,
nothing's cheap.
No, it's really not. Which really behooves us to examine for a minute just how appropriate it is to highlight how decadent and indulgent the 80s were. Mm-hmm. You know, the 80s was a decade of not only consumerism, but materialism as well. Like, where else would you have multi-million-dollar mansions? Exclusive private islands, boats, and yachts, and fancy cars catting around like Rolls Royce. That is so 80s. And Ferraris and Mercedes Benz.
Well, you know that you have arrived when someone was driving around in a Mercedes Benz back in the 80s.
Yeah, that is 80s too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And if one had gotten themselves a Mercedes Benz back then, you had arrived. It was like everything back then, all in the media. Like, I'm rich, I have a Mercedes. They were pretty cute, though. Some of them were.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You were styling and profiling, as Ric Flair would so often say. Woo! But here now we have a dashing, rugged vice cop who had the good pleasure of catting around in a Ferrari. You go, Crockett.
Nicely done, Crockett. So Sonny Crockett was driving around a black sporty Ferrari Daytona Spider that he and Tubbs careened around in style in season 1 and 2. And it happened to etch itself into our nostalgic golden memories.
Yeah, yeah.
The ever-iconic scene from the Au revoir involved in Crockett and Tubbs driving through Miami at nighttime to the backdrop of Phil Collins' song, In the Air Tonight.
Oh, they're happy now.
Phil Collins!
Yeah, that's her jam. That is her jam. Jelly or strawberry, anyone she likes.
Yes, I just had to pause there for Phil Collins. Anyway, so iconic but fun fact. Did you know that Crockett's Ferrari Daytona was in all actuality a kit car?
Okay, yeah.
Yes, it was actually a modified Corvette. That's still no small prize.
No.
A plexiglass body on top of a Chevy Corvette chassis with a Corvette power plant, sitting rolling on Pirelli tires. So one may ask, why? Why did the creative execs decide to go this route for the Ferrari? Simply put, it was cheaper or more budget friendly than using an actual genuine Daytona Spider.
Well, when you're bouncing around $1 million plus an episode, yeah, you want to start looking where you can pinch some coin. They need to put me on set. I'll help them.
Right, yeah. They went from eating, caviar to now they're having ramen noodles on the set,
Yes, like there's a coupon for that. But there was a bit of a hiccup amidst all of the noise surrounding the Daytona, coming straight from the top, from Ferrari. Yeah. Ferrari execs weren't nary too happy that this ersatz, aka knockoff Ferrari, was accruing such popularity with the masses that they just flat out offered to provide Miami Vice with their new flagship car, the White Testarossa, introduced in season 3.
Wow. I wonder if that was kind of like something planned. Like, was that plotted so that they could get that car?
It might have been. It might have been. Fans were upset, though. They liked that black one. So, and we'll get into that more because, like, the show started out with a bang. Yeah. And then, like most shows, it starts to tire on fans. I don't know.
Unfortunately. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting component to factor in is that the series Miami Vice heavily impacted was how the show and the riveting portrayal highlighted throughout on the show surrounding Miami really changed the look, feel, and expectations for the general populace on the city of Miami.
Yeah.
And its surrounding suburbs. So the excitement really boosted its overall aura and vibe.
It really did, Coop. The hypnotic components that came together and came through the unfolding storytelling that came through the weekly drama offerings of Miami Vice greatly artistically contributed to the newfound magnetism and mystique that defined Miami. So why, again, is this a big deal?
Well, because in the earlier days of Miami, Florida, it was still just a hot tropical retreat or community that boasts a large island population from various countries concentrated in the Caribbean.
This is a common theme and backdrop of so many of the episodes of Miami Vice.
True. Very true, Kennard. But it was still largely a tranquil, quiet piece of sunny paradise that beckoned to the older retirement population until about the mid-'80s, when things, as most things eventually do, changed. And Miami truly changed and morphed to the new, exciting, trend-worthy Miami. Fun fact, did you know that Miami tourism officials credit Miami Vice for transforming the impression of the city from a retirement community to a fun, exciting place and happening party spot for young people to visit? That is a complete 180.
It is.
If there ever was one. So alas, no more was Miami viewed solely as a retirement mecca.
Ah, whatever will the Golden Girls do?
Blanche!
Oh my goodness, I don't care who you are, that's funny.
Yes!
Now, during the 80s, Miami Vice was part of the pop culture movement, an uptick in interest in the happenings of Miami Vice, as well as the city itself, and gaining the reputation as a fast-paced, exciting, intoxicating mecca. Lots of focus put on South Beach, where many of the show's takes are filmed right there, on site of like downtown Miami, depicting the up-and-coming area at the time around Brickell Avenue. Also over by the marina around Bayside. Then we got attention going on in South Beach, like the infamous Ocean Drive, Lincoln Mall area, Collins Avenue. And then you've got Coconut Grove, which was one of the more affluent areas there.
Yeah.
And as well as Key Biscayne. So all of this and more definitely added to that mounting Miami Vice mystique.
Yeah. And Miami, I am sure, is so very different now than the last time that we were there.
Oh my goodness, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. I can only imagine just how built up and modernized it's become. Long from its raw earlier stages, we saw it in the early 80s and mid-90s, and what we remember by way of nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Also by what can still visibly be observed in some older works and examples of other TV shows and movies.
Oh yeah, totally. Like Police Academy 5.
That's a good one.
That was actually the first Police Academy I saw. I love Police Academy.
Yes.
Ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of them crazy, crazy movies. But it took place right there in Miami in the mid-90s, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Also, like Scarface with Al Pacino. You mentioned that one earlier. That movie came out in 1983, a year before Miami Vice debuted in 1984. Fans of that movie can do a mental comparison of the activity contained therein, how Miami looked, and the kind of feel it exuded in the early 80s and such. Really, these earlier works were an appropriate, nice segue into what Miami Vice came into being on the heels of said movie, just described in 1984. Same feel, and South Beach was a no man's land in the early days of Miami Vice.
It really was. And the obvious presence of the huge aged retirement snowbird residents that flocked to Miami, or really the state of Florida, really boomed and was a thing back in the day. And those residents made it their home.
Yep, they set up camp. Can we say Golden Girls? Wearing their sweaters and stuff down. It's like, they're in Miami. What is the world?
Yes, and it would be Golden Girls on every corner and every neighborhood.
Exactly.
So this notion was appropriately portrayed and baked into Golden Girls. And we totally love them, and we'll be covering their history and our personal favorite moments on the show real soon here on the Caramel Apples podcast. So stay tuned.
I am excited about that.
I know.
I love the Golden Girls. I don't know. They're great.
Yeah, it's been too long coming. So
Yeah. We sat here and we were talking about how this show, Miami Vice, again, we're talking about that, how it changed the landscape of Miami and its consumerism, its economy. So, the last time we were there was, in 2002. So, it's probably not even the same place.
Yeah.
When we went down there, our cousin lived down there, and, it had a more island-like, more laid-back flair. It wasn't, we're talking about what Miami Vice, it pulled out the underbelly of it.
Right.
It pulled out stuff, and we were like, okay, no doubt, that was there. You could tell that was there.
Sure.
But it wasn't, it was underground.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still more, go to the beach, go get good Cuban food, Cuban coffee, listen to your salsa merengue, whatever. Now it's just like there's models there, people. It's like another Hollywood. There's a lot of the how do I say this kind? You have a lot of Northerners come down.
Yeah.
And it's just different. The landscape, it's like you said, everything morphs and changes. It's different now. Like it could be Atlanta, Chicago, whatever, with palm trees.
Right. Yeah.
And I bet it really, really is built up. So, I mean, we wouldn't even probably recognize it from when we were last there. And that was just, 20 years ago?
Well, then you say it like that. It's like 20 years ago. Wow.
It has changed.
Yes. They would be remiss if they didn't.
You silly apples. Come on now. Get real. Well, we've got a bit more caramel apple goodness to share next week on Miami Vice. So, we'll be coming back to this. Miami Vice was exceptionally huge back in the day, and we still got a lot more to share on what we liked the most, what we didn't like so much, favorite characters, songs, episodes, and such. So, yeah, get ready to join us again for part 2 next week as we continue this fascinating discussion about Miami Vice.
So that's it for this week's episode. But next time, we'll continue our retro trek on Miami Vice Part 2. So stay tuned. You won't want to miss this. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. We realize you made the choice to push play, and we so appreciate your support. Subscribe to make sure you never miss a beat, and be ready to revisit more memorable fun archives and better times. Same time, same place in the sweet spot. You just experienced the Caramel Apples podcast, where the topic is really about apples. Bye.
Bye.